Now, the Israel-Palestine director of Human Rights Watch has resigned, accusing the organization's leadership of blocking a report critical of Israel. In his resignation letter, Omar Shakir said, at times, some in the organization, driven by bias, pressure, politics or cowardice, have tried to manipulate our findings on Israel-Palestine to arrive at their preferred outcomes. But throughout my tenure, the review process ensured we published the facts. I can no longer say that. Days before the report was due to be published, he says the executive director halted publication. I'm not aware of any precedent in the organization's history, he says, for such an extraordinary decision. I have lost my faith in the integrity of how we do our work and our commitment to principled reporting on the facts and application of the law. Well, joining us now on the News Hour in a minute, I'll tell you about that. But let's look at Human Rights Watch's response to that statement. In a statement, Human Rights Watch said that the report in question raised complex and consequential issues. In our review process, we concluded that aspects of the research and the factual basis for our legal conclusions needed to be strengthened to meet Human Rights Watch's high standards. For that reason, they say the publication of the report was paused pending further analysis and research. The process is ongoing. And now, joining us on the News Hour is Omar Shakir, former director at Human Rights Watch. Thank you for your time, Omar. Help us understand first more about the reasons behind your resignation. Was there a single moment or decision that made your position at Human Rights Watch untenable?
Sure. I mean, my resignation was, of course, driven by the decision of our executive director to halt publication of our report on the right of return for Palestinian refugees. Now, this is a report that had been in works for months. It was based on interviews with dozens of Palestinian refugees, documenting the impact of Israel's longstanding denial of return on refugees, connecting what was happening with the recent ethnic cleansing and mass displacement in Gaza and the West Bank with Israel's attacks on UNRWA, as well as the longstanding denial of return. The report was fully vetted through Human Rights Watch's review process. It was slated for publication, coded to the website, translated, and just days before its release, our executive director pulled the report. He did not put any reasons in writing. To this date, he has refused to do so. But my months-long engagement on this report made clear that it was not driven by law or by facts. It was, in fact, a decision to halt publication, to halt a call for respecting human rights out of concern that we'd be seen as challenging the Jewish state, which they felt would be too risky for the organization.
Omar, without violating confidentiality, which aspects of the report do you believe prompted intervention from the senior leadership? What made it so consequential?
Look, I mean, there are different voices, of course, in senior leadership, but I think at the end of the day, senior leadership found it inconvenient to have a report that was focused on the right of return, that spotlighted the issues of refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, millions of refugees, generation after generation born with lifelong refugee status, without basic rights, without the ability to return to their homeland. For them, that was inconvenient because that question remains the third rail in many ways in progressive Western institutions. Organizations like HRW, which have called it genocide and apartheid and ethnic cleansing, when it comes to the right of return, hesitate. And in this case, are willing to upend decades of Human Rights Watch's policies and practices because they were afraid of the consequences. So I think ultimately it was the focus on the right of return for refugees in the Arab region to their original homes in what's now Israel.
Human Rights Watch has said that the report required further strengthening. What are they saying here? Do you think the concerns are about the methodology in the report, or were they about the conclusions themselves?
That claim, unfortunately, I have to say, is completely bogus. The report was coded to our website. It was completely reviewed and finalized. We briefed external partners. I've been at Human Rights Watch for a decade. A report like that doesn't reach that stage, and especially not a big report in Israel-Palestine, without it being fully signed off and approved. And I think more than that, the law is very straightforward. The right of return is a core concept of international law enshrined in major treaties, affirmed by the International Court of Justice. The denial of return is a crime against humanity has been set out by the International Criminal Court. Human Rights Watch has set it out in multiple reports, including a report in 2023 on the Chagos Islands. The methodology, we did dozens of interviews, visited refugee camps across the region. This is textbook HRW. I've released dozens of reports. This report was much more straightforward than many other reports I released. The real difference here is we have a new leadership that showed an utter lack of commitment and fidelity to the way that Human Rights Watch documents its facts and it consistently applies the law.
But they say, Omar, that the process is ongoing and that the report may still be published after further research. Do you believe that's a genuine possibility?
Look, that's correct in the sense that they have not formally killed the report. But I spent 2 months, giving many possible different ways for this to move forward, and they closed every one of that door. And the path that they have left open involves waiting for weeks and then having the report go all the way to the drawing board, even though this is a report that was finalized, approved, even if there are suggestions. And I made many efforts to offer to make elaborations, and they were all refused. And so going back to the drawing board, when it's very clear that this is not about, the law and the facts need to be strengthened, but a fundamental lack of courage to call out the reality for what it is, gives me little faith that it'll ultimately be published. I hope it's published. We owe it to the dozens of people we interviewed that their stories come out. So I hope, in fact, HRW publishes it, but I'm not optimistic.
What does this episode tell us about the challenges human rights organizations face? And Omar, do you worry that your resignation could be used by any side, really, to undermine the credibility of human rights reporting more broadly?
Israel-Palestine has always been a litmus test for international institutions. I'm so proud that we at Human Rights Watch have risen to the challenge time and time again, but we failed this time. And the reason I've chosen to speak out about this, even though, of course, it can be weaponized, is because my primary duty is to human rights victims, including the people we interviewed and our partners in the fight. I spent a year attesting on Jazeera and many other programs about the credibility of our work. I lack credibility myself and integrity if I'm not willing to call it out when we get it wrong. It's simple accountability. And ultimately, I do hope, because we need a strong, courageous Human Rights Watch. The world needs it. And I hope that's what takes place. We have the most incredible staff all around the world. What we need is a leadership that's committed to the way that we work.
Thank you for speaking to us, Omar. Thank you very much for joining us on Al Jazeera. Omar Shakir, former director of Israel-Palestine at Human Rights Watch.
Thank you.
Don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.